Nore ke te atua manga rongo ki te whenua. Whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Ko te mihi tuatai ki tō mātou e te rangi. E pā, he mihi whakawhetai tēnei ki a koe mō tēnei huhunga ki konei e tēnei rā hira. No mai, haere mai, whakatau mai I wanganui a tātou. I want to start with a prayer that was prayed here on the 6th of February 1840 by a rangatira ngā manu who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And this was his prayer. Hara mai Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Hara mai ki tēnei ao. Hara mai mā ngā hua kei roto ki a koe. This was the optimistic moe of one of the rangatira that signed on that fateful day. There's always been prayer here at Waitangi. In fact, when Busby was here, there was a visiting dignitary from Sydney who said on his return, "It's rather too formal and religious for me. There are too many prayers at Waitangi." And I think perhaps today some might think the same thing. There was a prayer 100 years later in 1934 when Lord Bledisloe handed the land back to the nation. Standing in this place, that time ago he said, "Let Waitangi be a tatau pounamu for us all." And then he prayed, "Oh God, grant that the sacred compact here made in these waters may be faithfully and honourably kept for all days to come." Not many of us know that Waitangi began as a love story. Maukuku was hidden deep in a watery cave not far from here to hide her from unwanted suitors. And along came a handsome young man who a takaroa, and he heard a tangi deep in the watery cave, and he found his young puhi. That led to a marriage and led to a new whānau identity. In these days of realpolitik, it's hard to understand that the Tiriti o Waitangi was also originally a love story. Queen Victoria heard the tangi in the north of the rangatira, their discontent with the lawless settlers that were arriving here from Europe. It resulted in a covenantal agreement that some have likened to a marriage, and it too created a new identity. The formal arrangements took place over 2 days on the 5th of 6th of February in 1840. After the first problematic day on the 5th, the rangatira retired to Te Tau rangatira. There they had a wānanga about the Queen's proposal. They were joined there by Karuwha, Te Whare Henry Williams, and he put his word behind the treaty, and he said, "These are the Crown's intentions to you." He said, "This is Queen Victoria's act of love to you. She wants to ensure that you keep what is yours, your property, your rights and privileges, and those things you value." Framed by Williams, it was understood as a covenant. For as Hani Heke, the first signatory, said, "It is even as the word of God." This likening of it to Te Paipera Tapu, the revelation of God's love to creation. The scriptures also define the nature of that love. It's a cross-shaped ethic where one is willing to lay down their life for the other. A covenant of love such as the treaty is a sacrificial covenant. This is the kind of love that Williams referred to at Te Tau rangatira, an ethic that seeks the best outcome for the other. And to paraphrase the Apostle Paul, Love does not dishonour the other, and love never fails. In other words, Williams was committing Victoria's representatives to always seek the highest good for Māori. And if the treaty was an act of love by Victoria to Māori by extension, it also needs to be an act of love by our governments to Māori. Love is the hermeneutical portal for understanding the treaty. It's the interpretive key. Without love, it's an empty rhetoric and a legalistic doctrine. Like all love stories, it didn't take long for it to fall into a demise. Like all relational love stories, as I said this morning, Hollywood doesn't write our script. Ngā Manu's hopes were dissipating. In short time, the fruit of Waitangi began to wither, and Honeheke of flagpole fame understood this. Panekariao understood this as the shadows on the land began to shift. This great Te Rarawa chief who had likened this place to a place of hope. By the time that Governor Grey had set his troops over the Mangatawhiri in 1863, the fruit was positively rotten. The invasion was like an act of violence of an unfaithful spouse. In response, the influential Ngāti Hauā chief, the kingmaker Wiremu Tamihana, was moved to petition Queen Victoria, and he wrote, "Madam, the covenant came to this island, and you said in good faith that the Māori should retain their chieftainship, their mana, and their lands. These are your declarations. And now, O Mother, assert your authority, the authority which has been trampled on by Governor Grey, and give us back our land, our chieftainship, and our mana, of which the colonists and the governor are seeking to deprive us." Tamihana declared that the Queen's authority had been trampled on by her representatives because they had trampled on the mana of the treaty and her intentions of love that were embedded within that. Our reading today of love is our instruction for working out Te Tiriti. We need to ask, where has the church been at this time? The third voice at the treaty table whose representatives had convinced Māori that the treaty was a good thing. Where was the church during the invasion of the Waikato? Where was the church at Pukahinahina? Where was the church at Parihaka in 1881 when Bryce invaded that place? In short, the missionaries and the settler church in the main abandoned Māori, and apart from a few lone voices of the land was confiscated and lost, the language disadvantaged and the mana of rangatira trampled upon, the settler church was silent. In other words, by our silence, we have been complicit in the betrayal. The recovery of the prophetic voice, which began in the 1980s in some sectors of the church, is hopefully gathering some momentum. And we need to ask, why should the church step up? And there are two reasons. One is our whakapapa with the treaty. The second reason is that the treaty is in part a theological document. It cannot be truly understood without some biblical understanding. Some of its genesis, its language and its covenantal intentions are drawn from Te Paipera Tapu. It is the church in these days when the treaty is under attack that we should be reminding the nation about its covenantal commitment. Listen to the words of Sir William Martin, our first Chief Justice and Church Missionary Society leader. He said, "We have covenanted with these people and assured of them the full privileges of the subjects of the Crown. This compact," he said, "is binding. It's irrevocable. We cannot repudiate it so long as we retain the benefit by which we have obtained from it." I ask us this morning, what is the benefit that we new settlers, we Pākehā, have obtained? I want to quote Sir Eri Taihakure Jure, another Anglican churchman. In 1989 he said, "But then we must never forget that the treaty is not just a Bill of Rights for Māori, it's a Bill of Rights for Pākehā too. It is a treaty that gives the Pākehā the right to be here, hence the descriptor tangata tiriti. I will also add it is a treaty for all who enter the tatau paunamu, the waharoa of reconciliation. This is a kairos moment for our nation. It's a time of mana trampling. It's a time to honour the treaty and unequivocally restore its mana. It's a time to restore the mana of the Crown. It is time also to restore the mana of Te Iwi Māori and all the signatories and the witnesses of this sacred covenant, even those of the Church. It's not too late that this sacred compact here made in these waters may be faithfully and honourably kept for all times. I have confidence that Lord Bledisloe prayer will be answered because covenants are a God thing and they attract his attention. And I'm finishing now. In times past, it might seem like the treaty is a dead thing. Think Judge Prendergast's simple nullity ruling in 1877. But it has always surprised us. Sir Apirana Ngata, at the opening of this great whare with hundreds of toa, he performed the Te Rauparaha haka and he sang out, "Kamate, kamate, ka ora, ka ora." It was dead, but now it lives. As I finish, I want to quote Whakahuihui Verko, who in 1990 said these prophetic words, "E ta taha o ngā wahi o Waitangi noho ana tātou I reira, e tangi ana tātou ka mahara ki a hiro." Continuing on, he said, "We have come to this sacred ground because our tupuna left us this ground. As I remember the songs of the land, as I remember the history of our land, I weep here on the shores of the Bay of Islands. May God grant us the courage to be honest with one another, to be sincere with one another, and above all, to love one another in the strength of God. So I come to the waters of Waitangi to weep for what could have been a unique document in the history of the world of Indigenous people with the Pākehā, and I still have the hope that we can do it. Let us sit and listen to one another. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa."